Some of the new relic sets coming in 1.2 look absolutely crazy generic. And I mean generic in the best possible way. The more generic something is, the more flexible and more usable it is on multiple types of characters. So use the timestamps down below to skip to certain sets. Let's get right into it. The first new set is the new speed set. Messenger Traversing Hackerspace. Gonna call it the Messenger set from now on. The 2-piece set gives us a 6% increase in speed, and the 4-piece set gives us a 12% increase in speed that cannot stack and only lasts for 1 turn. The requirement to activate the 4-piece set, though, requires that an ultimate be used on an ally. Most characters in the game have a speed of around 100, so doing that conversion is actually pretty easy. It's going to be plus or minus 1 of 10% of 100. So if it's 6% speed, we're going to get about 6 points of speed. 12%, about 12 points of speed. And again, just plus or minus 1 if they're on the slower side, and plus 1 if they're on the a little bit faster side. This means that the equipping character can get an extra 18 points of speed when they pop their ult, if they run the 4-piece set. So since the 4-piece set does have that requirement though, it means that the set will be limited to certain characters that can either enhance or heal the team. So naturally, characters on the Harmony path or the Abundance path are going to be perfect candidates for this new Relic set. The exception being our 2 latest Harmony and Abundance characters, Locha and Yukong. This is because their ultimates are actually damage dealing ultimates and not buffing or healing type ultimates. Now there's actually another character that doesn't fall under one of these 2 paths that can actually use the 4-piece set, and that's Clara, because her ultimate is actually an enhance. And in Hoyoverse games, when the term ally is used, it typically includes the character themselves. And it even says that the ultimate can be used on themselves in the live stream, so we know that that works. However, since this one is kind of an oddball, I will say maybe it just needs to be tested just in case, but I do think that it's going to work. However, on the other hand, speed is not that desirable of a stat on Clara because we want her to be attacked in order to get those counterattacks off. But just thought I'd mention it anyway, since it is possible. Now, since the effect of this relic set is not stackable, you may think that we probably don't want to run 2 of these sets on the same team. So for example, if you use a healer and a Harmony character on the same team, and they both have the set, if they both pop their ultimates at around the same time, you will not get a 24% increase in speed. However, just because this is true doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't use the relic on multiple characters on the same team. You can instead just cycle their ultimates so that you can keep the speed buff up, since the buff only lasts 1 turn. So by cycling the ultimates, you're able to keep the uptime on that speed buff pretty consistently. Now, a character like Asta is very interesting for me with this new relic set because she already increases the team's speed by an astronomical metric ton. In addition, if you're using the Dance light cone, she just gives an insane amount of speed and action forward advancement. So I see a ton of potential with Asta on this new relic set. I'm excited to see what kind of shenanigans we can pull off with that. As for Bronya, I don't own the character, but the set seems like an upgrade over the Wind set, since it provides a speed boost for the entire team instead of just for her when she pops the ult. But someone who is more knowledgeable on Bronya, please let me know down in the comments if this set is better for her or not. In my opinion, it seems like it's going to be better. Now, even though this set is pretty generic, the Musketeer set is still the king of generic, because both DPS and support characters can use it. You also get a ton of 4-star versions just by playing the game. No farming required. However, the 2-piece set is pretty generic and can be slotted onto basically almost every character that would want speed. So if you happen to get some insane substats on it and you want to mix it with the Musketeer set 2-piece, then that's not a bad idea. I would mix and match those 2 sets if all of your main stats are perfect and if those substats are just absolutely out of this world. I wouldn't mix them if your substats are kind of subpar, because they pretty much do the same thing as a 4-piece Musketeer set, but then you're just missing on the extra basic attack damage. Alright, let's now move on to the Longevous Disciple. This set gives us extra HP and crit rate. 2-piece set gives us 12% HP, and the 4-piece set will give us an extra 8% crit rate for 2 turns that is stackable up to 2 times whenever the wearer is hit or has their HP consumed by an ally, including themselves. The including themselves, just like the last set, is hilarious to me. There are so many other skills in the game that specify ally, and as far far as the game's coding goes, as far as I know, Ally has always included the character themselves, but it was never really clear and explicitly stated, but now it is. So thumbs up to Hoyoverse for now actually clearly stating that. So since the requirement for the 4-piece set is that we have to take damage or have our health consumed by an ally, this means that the 4-piece set is limited to characters that have high aggro value, since one of the ways to trigger it is to get hit. So this means a character like Ting Yun. Just kidding. This artifact set is not as generic as the last set since getting hit is not really in your control, so that means the second part is one of the most consistent ways to activate the 4-piece set. However, the set does use the term get hit instead of take damage. This means that March's shield may actually be a good way to activate the 4-piece set bonus. But otherwise, only Arlen and Blade take a chunk of their health consistently to proc the set effect. And actually, Jinglu is going to be able to do this as well, but you didn't hear it from me, okay? And it's too bad that the trial that we had didn't show off any of her abilities. In terms of the 4-piece set, pretty limited to just Arlen and Blade. The 2-piece set for extra HP percent works for any of our HP scaling damage characters, then also our HP scaling healers, Natasha and Bailu. However, in my opinion, a 12% increase in HP is not that much, and might be better to invest in speed buffs from the speed set instead. So I did a very simple calculation for Natasha, and a 12% increase in HP translates to about a 4% increase in healing. So for example, Natasha's ultimate heals allies for 12.8% of her max HP plus 326. So a Natasha with about 3,760 HP and an outgoing healing of 44.5%. This means that she has a maxed outgoing healing body, and then her 10% from her special trace. She heals for about 1,166 HP. Replacing her 4-piece relic set with 12% extra HP relic set is going to increase her HP to 4,026. The 12% gives us about 266 points of extra HP. Her heal then increases to 1,216. So in my opinion, that's really not that much and is not worth it. I would stick to the extra speed, which is going to come from the new Messenger Relic set. When you get the chance, I would probably switch Natasha's Relic set over to that set, but Musketeer is going to be pretty good for a while, so it's not like you're in any kind of immediate hurry to update her relics. But of course, in the meantime, while you are trying to hunt for a 4-piece set, you could just go with a 2-piece Messenger set and then a 2-piece Longevous Disciple set. Since Natasha, of course, doesn't really want the extra 12% attack, and the 10% increase in attack damage isn't that much for Natasha either. Now let's move on to the new planar ornaments, the new set that gives crit rate and basic attack and skill damage, Rutilant Arena. So the 2-piece set is going to give us an extra 8% crit rate, and then once we reach 70% crit rate, it will give us an extra boost to our basic attack and skill damage of 20%. Now the requirement for this is pretty high at 70% versus the inert Salsodo at 50%. Either way, any DPS character that relies on enhanced attacks or skills to deal their damage is going to like this new planar ornament set. This pretty much means any hunt character, destruction characters, and several erudition characters are going to like the new set. The exceptions are obviously the characters that really rely on their follow-up attacks more and their ultimate for damage. They'll want to stick to inert Salsodo. So those characters are characters like Jing Yuan and Clara. Himiko is somewhat of an odd one. I think both sets are still pretty good on her. Her follow-up attacks are dependent on weakness break and the matchup, and her kit also pushes her skill damage output by quite a bit. For example, she has a trace that increases its damage output by 20% to burned enemies, and also the fire relic set increases skill damage. However, in certain matchups, you only need to weakness break 1 time instead of 3 times to get a follow-up attack. At the end of the day, I don't think you can go wrong with either on her, as long as you can reach the requirements to activate the planar ornament set. So in that sense though, Salsodo may be better and easier to build for since it only requires 50%. And in my opinion, there's no rush to farm a new planar ornament set for Himiko. if you already have her on Inert Salsodo. Also forgot to mention for Himiko, she has another bonus trace that increases her crit rate when her HP is above 80%, which makes it that much easier to reach that 70% mark for the new Relic set. Now, Yanqing is also a kind of weird one. He can easily reach 70% crit rate through his abilities alone. He also has follow-up attacks attached to his skill, but it's RNG based. His ultimate also does a lot of damage, but his skill equally does a pretty good amount of damage as well. In my opinion, however, you use his skill a lot more often than his ult, since his ultimate has such a high cost to it. And I think that the 20% extra damage to your skill is going to ultimately win out in the end. And if we can reach 100% crit rate with Yanqing, hitting crit damage every single time is one of the best feelings in the world. So Yanqing is going to have high crit rate anyway, so hitting that 70% requirement is going to be pretty easy. His skill already gives him nearly 20%, and then his ultimate gives him another 60%. So the two-piece set in of itself is already 68 plus the 5% base. We're pretty much already at the 70% requirement. Your Seelas and your Dan Hungs, however, may want to switch to the new planar ornament set eventually, but definitely don't feel like it's necessary right now. These characters definitely rely more heavily on their skills to deal their damage. Let's move on to the next planar ornament set, the Broken Keel, which increases the effect res of the character and then also the team's crit damage. This set will increase the wearer's effect res by 10%, and then if the character reaches 30% effect res or more, it will increase all allies' crit damage by 10%. Effect res is a super underrated stat. Building enough to resist debuffs consistently is going to be huge later on, especially for any kind of new debuff mechanics that may come. Now, I personally haven't ever built enough effect res to see a noticeable difference in resisting debuffs, but it's gotta work, theoretically. Also, I don't know about you guys, but I get a ton of effect res on my relics. And so as an example of things that you might want to resist, things like imprisonment or weaken are some of the debuffs that pop up immediately into my head. And then there are the unique debuffs in the game, like for example, Kafka's mind control, and then the Deer's berserk ability. Those mechanics completely forfeit control over your character, and if it happens to your cleanser, well, right, you're just out of luck until the debuff runs out naturally. Now also, there is no clause that states that this buff for the crit damage is not stackable. So that means we can theoretically have everyone on the team wear the set and achieve a 40% crit damage boost to the entire team. Stacking this buff seems very easy to achieve because it only requires 30%. We're already covering 30% of it with the 10% we get by running the two-piece set. But this means we need 20% from substats or from other effects like light cones or traces. And if 4 seems a little bit too overboard because you'd rather use other sets on your other damage-dealing characters like Inert Salsodo or the new Rutilant Arena set, 2 or 3 is still pretty good. 20 to 30% crit damage is still a noticeable increase in damage for your damage dealers. I have not looked at all of the characters' traces to see which ones have natural effect res in their kits, but if they do, then they are a prime candidate for this new planar ornament set. Now, in terms of light cones, there are 2 light cones that will raise the effect res of the character. An abundance light cone and then a preservation light cone. Perfect timing will increase effect res by 16% at S1 and 32% at S5, so that already reaches our requirement. At S1, however, it leaves only 4% left to cover with substats, and that's pretty dang easy. The preservation light cone is the Herda Shop one, and this will increase our effect res by 8%. However, unfortunately, this light cone doesn't really synergize that well with any preservation kits, as far as I know. This is pretty much just a very generic shield, damage reduction, and effect res light cone. But someone let me know down in the comments if there is a character that really desires this light cone. Maybe I'm just forgetting. But anyway, with 8% effect res, that leaves 12% left to cover with substats. So again, that's also not that much. So I ended up looking through the character list to see which ones give effect res with traces, and that list ends up being Serval, who can get an extra 10% once she reaches Ascension 6. Bailu also can get an extra 10%, but requires Ascension 6 as well. Natasha gets a little bit more. She gets about 18% extra effect res once she hits level 75, though. March has one singular trace that gives an extra 6%, but requires Ascension 5. Sampo has 10% effect res boost, but also requires Ascension 6. And then Arlen has a lot of effect res boost, but he requires level 75 in order to reach 18% extra effect res. So those are all prime candidates for the Broken Keel planar ornament set. As for whether or not they are meta or not, I'm not going to make that call, but these are all good options. And ultimately it depends on what kind of team setup you're trying to go for. For example, right, if we were to take Natasha, you'd probably be deciding between the Fleet of Ageless versus the Broken Keel. Do we want more HP for extra healing and the extra attack percentage, 8%? Or do we want that extra 10% crit damage? It probably comes down to what characters you're using. For example, if you plan to use Kafka, attack would be preferred to improve your dot damage. And if you're using hunt characters with high crit rate, like Zila or Yanqing, crit damage may be more desirable. Anyway guys, this planar ornament set really intrigues me the most, so let me know what you guys think about this particular set down in the comments below. And in the meantime, if you haven't seen my analysis on Blade or Kafka, I'll leave them on the screen right now.